The stars shimmered like diamonds against the velvet blackness of space, but Captain Alina Voss felt nothing but dread. Her ship, Hope's Light, drifted silently in orbit around a desolate moon on the edge of Imperial-controlled territory. It was supposed to be a routine mission, delivering medical supplies and aid workers to a struggling colony ravaged by disease. Instead, it had turned into a nightmare. Elena stood at the bridge, staring at the holographic display showing the wreckage of her convoy. 3 supply ships and 1 escort vessel were gone, reduced to floating debris after an ambush that came out of nowhere. The attackers hadn't even identified themselves before opening fire. They struck hard and fast, leaving no time for retaliation. Of the 50 crew members aboard Hope's Light and its sister vessels, only 10 survived, including Elena herself. She clenched her fists as anger burned inside her chest. This wasn't just an attack, it was a massacre. And what made it worse was who might have ordered it. Rumors swirled among human colonies about the Galactic Empire growing increasingly hostile toward Earth's influence. For decades, humanity had contributed resources, knowledge, and manpower to keep the Empire running smoothly. But lately, whispers of resentment had begun to spread. Some believed the Empire saw humans as expendable, a means to an end rather than equal partners. Elena's thoughts were interrupted when Lieutenant Marcus Hale approached her. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he held out a datapad. "Captain," he said quietly, "you need to see this." Taking the device, Elena scrolled through the files Marcus had recovered from their damaged communication logs. At first glance, they seemed like fragments of encrypted messages, nothing unusual during wartime. But as she pieced them together, her blood ran cold. Hidden within the code were orders signed with an Imperial seal. "They targeted us on purpose," Elena whispered, her voice shaking. She looked up at Marcus, whose expression mirrored her horror. This wasn't some rogue faction or pirates. Someone high up in the Empire wanted us dead. Marcus hesitated before speaking. "Do you think they'll admit it, or try to cover it up?" Elena didn't answer immediately. She knew how the Empire operated. Public relations mattered more than truth. If they admitted responsibility, it would spark outrage across human territories, and possibly rebellion. No, they'd find a way to shift blame. Already, news outlets loyal to the Empire were reporting the incident as a tragic accident caused by unidentified mercenaries. But Elena couldn't let it go unchallenged. Too many lives had been lost. Too much trust had been broken. She turned back to the viewport, gazing at the lifeless moon below. Somewhere beyond it lay Earth, her home, and the heart of humanity's resistance. If the Empire thought they could silence her people so easily, they were wrong. "We're heading back," she announced firmly. "We'll bring proof of this betrayal to Earth, and if the Empire tries to bury the truth, we'll dig it up ourselves." As Hope's Light prepared to leave orbit, Elena vowed not to rest until justice was served, for her crew, for humanity, and for every life senselessly taken. Little did she know, her journey would lead her down a path darker and more dangerous than she ever imagined. The journey back to Earth was long and heavy with grief. Captain Elena Voss sat alone in her quarters, staring at the cracked screen of her datapad. The encrypted files she had recovered from the wreckage were undeniable proof of betrayal, an Imperial directive ordering the ambush that wiped out most of her convoy. Yet, as she thought about presenting this evidence to Earth's leaders, doubt crept into her mind. Would anyone believe her? Or would they dismiss it as paranoia, too afraid to confront the Empire? When Hope's Light finally docked at Earth's orbital station, Elena stepped onto familiar soil for the first time in months. The bustling corridors of the United Human Council headquarters felt suffocating compared to the silence of space. She walked briskly, ignoring curious glances from aides and politicians who whispered behind their hands. Word of the attack had already spread, but official reports painted it as an unfortunate accident caused by rogue elements, not a deliberate act of aggression. Elena entered the council chamber, where representatives from across human territories gathered to discuss the growing tensions with the Galactic Empire. As she stood before them, holding up the data pad, the room fell silent. "This isn't speculation," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "These are direct orders signed by someone within the Empire. They wanted us dead because we're becoming too powerful, too independent. If we don't stand together now, they'll keep targeting us until there's nothing left." Her words sparked murmurs throughout the chamber. Some nodded in agreement, while others exchanged skeptical looks. Senator Harlan Graves, a prominent figure known for his cautious approach, leaned forward. "Captain Voss, even if your claims are true, and I emphasize if, what do you propose we do? Declare war on the Empire? We can't win against their fleet." Alina clenched her jaw. She expected resistance, but hearing it lay bare stung more than she anticipated. Still, she pressed on. "I'm not asking for war. I'm asking for unity, for preparation. But most importantly," she paused, drawing a deep breath, "I'm asking for help from those who know how to fight." A hush fell over the room. Everyone understood what she meant. Decades ago, humanity had imprisoned its most ruthless military leaders after a brutal interstellar conflict. These men and women were war criminals, infamous for their brutal tactics and willingness to sacrifice anything and anyone for victory. Admiral Cal Draven was among them, locked away in a maximum security prison orbiting Jupiter. He was the only person Alina could think of who might understand the cold calculus required to face the Empire. Senator Graves shook his head. "You want us to release monsters like Draven, to unleash people who care nothing for morality or humanity." "They may be monsters," Alina shot back, "but right now, they're our best chance. The Empire respects strength, not pleas for peace. If we don't show them we're willing to fight back, they'll crush us without hesitation." The argument dragged on for hours, with voices rising and tempers flaring. In the end, no formal decision was made. Defeated but determined, Alina turned to underground resistance groups scattered across Earth. Unlike the cautious politicians, these rebels saw the urgency of the situation. With their support, she secured permission to visit the Jupiter prison. As her shuttle departed for the desolate gas giant, Alina stared out the window, her reflection pale against the swirling orange clouds below. She knew she was walking a dangerous line, one that could cost her everything, including her soul. But as she repeated the names of her fallen crew members under her breath, she reminded herself why she had to take this risk. For survival, for justice, for humanity. The prison orbiting Jupiter was a fortress of steel and shadow, its jagged silhouette cutting through the endless orange haze of the gas giant below. Known as Blackstone Penitentiary, it housed humanity's darkest secrets, war criminals whose names had become synonymous with destruction. Alina Voss felt her stomach churn as her shuttle docked at the facility's grim docking bay. The airlock hissed open, revealing a cold, sterile corridor lit by harsh fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry insects. Alina stepped out, flanked by 2 guards assigned to escort her. She carried no weapons. Protocol forbade visitors from bringing anything dangerous into Blackstone. But she didn't need them. Her determination was weapon enough. As they walked deeper into the labyrinthine structure, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Cameras tracked their every move, while heavy blast doors sealed off each section behind them. The weight of the place pressed down on her chest, suffocating yet strangely fitting for what she was about to do. Finally, they'd reached a secure chamber where Admiral Cal Draven awaited. The door slid open with a metallic groan, revealing a man seated at a small table. He looked older than the images Alina had seen in history archives. His once sharp features softened by time, his dark hair streaked with gray. But his eyes were unchanged, sharp, calculating, and devoid of mercy. He glanced up as she entered, his gaze piercing through her like a blade. "Captain Voss," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "I heard you survived an ambush. Impressive." Alina ignored the remark and took a seat across from him. "Admiral Draven," she replied evenly. "We don't have much time. I'll get straight to the point. Humanity is under attack, not just militarily, but existentially. The Empire betrayed us, targeting our medical corps deliberately. If we don't fight back now, there won't be anything left to save. Draven leaned back in his chair, studying her intently. And you think I'm the answer? You want me, a man who burned entire star systems, to play savior? I don't want you to save us, Elena shot back. I want you to teach us how to survive. Your methods may be brutal, but they worked. Right now, that's exactly what we need. For a moment, Draven said nothing. Then he smiled, a thin, humorless curve of his lips. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Either way, I admire your honesty. His tone shifted, growing colder. But here's the deal. If I agree to help, I run things my way. No interference, no second guessing. If you can't live with that, walk away now. Elena hesitated. She knew agreeing to his terms would mean crossing moral lines she'd sworn never to cross. Lives would be lost, not just enemies, but innocents caught in the crossfire. Yet, as she thought of the Empire's betrayal and the lives already sacrificed, she realized she had no choice. Survival demanded sacrifice, however ugly it might be. Agreed, she said firmly. You'll have full autonomy over strategy. But remember this. If you turn on us, if you betray humanity again, I will stop you, even if it costs me everything. Draven chuckled softly, leaning forward. Fair enough. Now tell me, Captain, who else have you brought into this little rebellion? Over the next hour, Elena outlined her plan to release other imprisoned officers, all former war criminals, who could contribute to the effort. Each name elicited a flicker of interest from Draven, though his expression remained unreadable. When she finished, he nodded slowly. You've got guts, Captain, he said. Let's see if they're enough to keep you alive. As Elena left the penitentiary hours later, the gravity of what she'd done settled over her like a storm cloud. She had unleashed monsters upon the galaxy, hoping they would protect humanity rather than destroy it. Whether she had made the right decision remained to be seen. All she knew was that the clock was ticking, and failure wasn't an option. The release of humanity's most infamous war criminals sent shockwaves through Earth's fractured society. News of their liberation spread like wildfire, sparking protests in major cities and heated debates among political leaders. Some hailed Elena Voss as a hero willing to do whatever it took to protect humanity, while others branded her a traitor for unleashing individuals responsible for some of history's darkest chapters. Admiral Cal Draven wasted no time assembling his team. Within days, he had gathered a group of former officers whose names were etched into the annals of interstellar warfare, not for valor, but for infamy. Each member carried a legacy of devastation, their reputations stained by actions that still haunted survivors across the galaxy. Commander Terran Solis was the first to arrive at the secret base where Draven and Elena were setting up operations. Known as the Shieldbreaker, Solis had earned her nickname during the siege of Calyx Prime, where she ordered the use of civilian populations as human shields to draw enemy fire. Her cold, calculating demeanor unnerved even Draven's hardened crew, and her piercing blue eyes seemed to see straight through anyone who dared question her loyalty. Next came Lieutenant Eric Kane, a tactical genius whose strategies often left entire fleets in ruins. Dubbed the Reaper by his enemies, Kane specialized in divide-and-conquer tactics that isolated and annihilated opposing forces piece by piece. Despite his brilliance, whispers of his ruthlessness followed him everywhere. He once sacrificed an entire allied squadron to bait an ambush, leaving no survivors. Finally, there was Major Lyra Quinn, whose expertise lay in psychological warfare. Quinn's campaigns relied on fear rather than brute force. She orchestrated propaganda broadcasts and false flag operations that destabilized planets from within. Entire civilizations collapsed under the weight of paranoia and distrust sown by her manipulations. Even now, years later, stories of her exploits made people uneasy. Elena watched as these figures, once reviled symbols of humanity's worst impulses, gathered around a makeshift war table. The tension in the room was palpable. These were not allies bound by trust or shared ideals. They were predators circling one another, sizing each other up. Yet beneath their hardened exteriors, there was something else, a flicker of purpose reignited after decades of imprisonment. Draven stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding silence. "Listen carefully," he began, his voice cutting through the air like steel. "We're not here to relive old glories or settle scores. Humanity is on the brink of extinction, and if we fail, none of us will have a future to fight for." Alina stepped forward, placing a holographic map of Imperial-controlled territories onto the table. "Our mission is simple: weaken the Empire enough to give humanity breathing room. That means hitting them where it hurts: supply lines, communication hubs, and key installations. But remember this: every decision we make reflects on all of us. If we lose the support of our own people, we've already lost." Quinn raised an eyebrow, leaning back in her chair. "You talk about winning hearts and minds, Captain, but you've brought us here to wage war. Those two goals don't mix well. And yet, here we are." Alina shot back, meeting Quinn's gaze without flinching. "I'm not asking you to be heroes. I'm asking you to do what you do best: fight. But understand this: if you cross the line I set, I won't hesitate to stop you." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Draven smirked, breaking the tension. "Well said, Captain. Now let's get to work." As plans unfolded and strategies took shape, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that she was playing with fire. These individuals were weapons of mass destruction, capable of incredible feats, but also catastrophic collateral damage. Could monsters truly be trusted to protect the innocent? Or would humanity's salvation come at the cost of its soul? Only time would tell. The Coalition's first mission was a calculated gamble, a daring raid on an Imperial supply depot orbiting a remote mining planet. The target was small but vital, serving as a hub for transporting resources to the Empire's front lines. If successful, the attack would cripple their logistics network and send a message that humanity wasn't going to roll over quietly. Admiral Cal Draven led the operation personally, his tactical brilliance evident in every detail of the plan. He divided their forces into 3 teams: one to disable the station's defenses, another to secure valuable intel stored in its databases, and a third, commanded by Alina, to evacuate civilian workers caught in the crossfire. "We're here to hurt the Empire," Draven reminded them during the briefing. "But we're not animals. Minimize casualties where possible." Alina nodded, though she couldn't help but feel uneasy about leaving so much discretion to Draven and his ruthless subordinates. Still, she trusted his experience. If anyone could pull this off, it was him. The assault began under cover of darkness, or rather, the eternal shadow cast by the massive gas giant nearby. Stealth fighters slipped past the depot's outer perimeter undetected, thanks to Major Lyra Quinn's ingenious use of hacked communication signals to confuse enemy sensors. Within minutes, Commander Terran Solis' team had neutralized the automated turrets guarding the docking bay, allowing the rest of the strike force to breach the facility. Inside, chaos erupted. Lieutenant Eric Kane coordinated the assault with cold efficiency, directing squads through narrow corridors while isolating pockets of resistance. His voice crackled over comms, calm and methodical. "Sector C is clear. Moving to D4. Watch your flanks. They've got reinforcements incoming." Meanwhile, Alina's team worked tirelessly to locate and extract the civilians trapped inside. Many were miners or technicians conscripted by the Empire, their faces pale with fear as they huddled in makeshift shelters. "Stay close," Alina urged them, her tone firm yet reassuring. "We're getting you out of here." But things quickly spiraled out of control. As Draven's forces pushed deeper into the station, the Empire launched a desperate counterattack. Reinforcements poured in from nearby patrol ships, overwhelming parts of the Coalition's advance. Explosions rocked the facility, sending debris raining down on both sides. Amidst the chaos, Alina heard screams echo through her comm unit, screams that chilled her to the bone. "Captain." Marcus Hale's panicked voice cut through the noise. "We've got reports of civilian casualties near Sector F. One of Kane's units breached too aggressively. They didn't wait for clearance." Alina's heart sank. She turned to see smoke billowing from a distant section of the station, flames licking at the hull. Despite Draven's orders to minimize harm, it seemed the line between precision and brutality had already blurred. Gritting her teeth, she barked commands to her team. "Double back to Sector F. Get those civilians out now." By the time the raid concluded, the coalition had achieved its primary objectives: destroying the depot and securing critical data about Imperial supply routes. But the cost weighed heavily on everyone involved. Dozens of civilians had died in the crossfire, victims of tactics that prioritized victory over restraint. Back aboard their flagship, tensions flared. Alina confronted Draven in the war room, her anger barely contained. "This isn't what I agreed to," she snapped, slamming her fist on the table. "You said you'd keep collateral damage to a minimum." Draven met her gaze unflinchingly. "War isn't clean, Captain," he replied coldly. "If you want results, sometimes sacrifices have to be made. Would you prefer we lost the battle instead?" Alina stared at him, torn between fury and despair. The mission had been a success, but at what cost? As news of the raid spread, public reaction was mixed. Some hailed it as a turning point, proof that humanity could fight back. Others condemned the loss of innocent lives, questioning whether the ends justified the means. For Alina, the answer remained unclear. All she knew was that the road ahead would only grow darker and harder to navigate. The aftermath of the supply depot raid rippled across human territories like a shockwave. News outlets buzzed with conflicting reports. Some hailed the operation as a bold strike against the Empire, while others condemned it as reckless and inhumane. Images of destroyed Imperial ships shared headlines with harrowing accounts of civilian casualties caught in the crossfire. For every person who cheered the Coalition's defiance, there was another who questioned whether Alina Voss and her team of war criminals were any better than their oppressors. Alina found herself at the center of this storm, her every move scrutinized by both supporters and critics. The resistance movement that had backed her initially began to fracture under the weight of public opinion. Some factions called for stricter oversight of Draven's strategies, demanding transparency and accountability. Others argued that desperate times required desperate measures, and if humanity wanted to survive, sacrifices were inevitable. Amidst the chaos, intelligence reports arrived that threatened to tip the scales further into uncertainty. A mole within the Empire's ranks had leaked critical information. The Galactic Empire was preparing to deploy a devastating superweapon capable of annihilating entire planets. Dubbed Oblivion, the weapon was designed not just to destroy military targets, but to obliterate civilizations as a show of dominance. Its first target? A densely populated human colony on the edge of Imperial space. Alina stared at the holographic projection of Oblivion schematics, her stomach sinking. If the Empire unleashed this weapon, millions would die, and humanity's morale would shatter beyond repair. She turned to Admiral Cal Draven, who stood silently beside her. "We need to stop this," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "If they use that thing, we're finished." Draven nodded grimly. "Stopping it won't be easy. It's being constructed in a heavily fortified shipyard deep in enemy territory. Even getting close will require tearing through half their fleet. And what about the colony?" Alina pressed. "We can't let them destroy it." Draven hesitated before speaking, his tone measured but unyielding. "There's only one way to neutralize Oblivion before it's operational. We hit the shipyard with an antimatter bomb." "But," he paused, looking directly at Alina. "The colony is too close. Detonating the bomb means sacrificing it. And everyone on it." The room fell silent. Alina felt the air leave her lungs as the weight of his words settled over her. Sacrificing one colony to save countless others. It was a cold, brutal logic that clashed violently with everything she believed in. Yet, even as her heart rebelled against the idea, her mind couldn't ignore the stark reality. If they didn't act, billions more would fall under the Empire's shadow. What happens if we delay? She asked quietly, though she already knew the answer. The Empire activates Oblivion, Draven replied without hesitation. And once it's online, there's no stopping it. This is our only chance. Alina clenched her fists, her thoughts racing. She thought of the faces of the civilians she'd fought so hard to protect during the last mission. Their fear, their hope. Could she really justify condemning thousands to save millions? Wasn't that the same kind of ruthless calculus the Empire used? As word of the plan spread among the Coalition, divisions deepened. Commander Terran Solis supported Draven without reservation, arguing that survival demanded sacrifice. Major Lyra Quinn suggested using propaganda to frame the colony's destruction as an unavoidable tragedy caused by the Empire itself, a tactic meant to rally support rather than spark outrage. Only Lieutenant Eric Kane voiced doubts, pointing out that such a drastic action could alienate humanity's remaining allies. In the end, the decision fell to Alina. She called an emergency council meeting, presenting the grim options to leaders from across human territories. The debate raged late into the night, voices rising and tempers flaring. When the final vote came, it was painfully close, but the majority sided with Draven's plan. As Alina left the chamber, her hands trembled. She had made the choice to sacrifice the colony, knowing full well the consequences. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered to herself, "Forgive me." The clock was ticking, and humanity's darkest hour loomed ahead. The decision to sacrifice the colony weighed heavily on Alina Voss as she prepared for the mission. Every step felt like walking through quicksand. Her body moved forward, but her heart lagged behind, burdened by guilt and doubt. The council had approved Draven's plan, but their votes hadn't eased the moral weight crushing her shoulders. She couldn't shake the image of the colony, a thriving hub of life, filled with families, children playing in the streets, elders sharing stories under alien suns, all reduced to ash because of her choice. Admiral Cal Draven noticed her silence during the final briefing aboard Hope's Light. He approached her after dismissing the others, his expression unreadable. "You look like someone carrying the world on their back," he said, his voice low. "I am," Alina replied sharply, turning to face him. Her eyes burned with anger and sorrow. "This isn't just a tactical strike, it's genocide. We're destroying our own people to stop the Empire." Draven didn't flinch. "It's not genocide if it saves billions more. War forces us to make impossible choices. You know that better than anyone." Alina wanted to argue, to scream at him for making this seem so simple. But deep down, she understood. If they didn't act now, Oblivion would become unstoppable, a weapon capable of erasing entire planets with a single blast. Still, understanding didn't make the pain any less real. The mission began under the cover of darkness, with stealth fighters slipping past Imperial patrols toward the fortified shipyard where Oblivion was being assembled. Alina led the evacuation team tasked with warning the colony about the impending attack. It was a futile effort. The colony's population numbered in the hundreds of thousands, far too many to relocate in time, but she refused to abandon them without trying. As her shuttle descended, chaos erupted below. News of the evacuation order spread quickly, sparking panic among the colonists. Streets overflowed with terrified civilians, scrambling for escape pods or overcrowded transport ships. Children cried, parents shouted, and the air buzzed with despair. Alina moved through the crowd, her voice hoarse from repeating the same grim message. "There isn't enough time. Please, get to the transports." One woman grabbed Alina's arm, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing this? Why destroy our home?" she demanded, her voice breaking. Alina opened her mouth to respond but found no words. Instead, she gently pried the woman's grip free and continued onward, each step heavier than the last. Meanwhile, Draven's forces breached the shipyard's defenses, engaging in fierce combat with Imperial troops guarding the facility. Explosions lit up the void of space as antimatter charges were planted strategically around Oblivion's core. Lieutenant Eric Kane coordinated the assault with precision, ensuring minimal losses while maintaining relentless pressure on the enemy. Back at the colony, Alina watched helplessly as the last transport launched into orbit, leaving thousands still stranded. A young boy ran up to her, clutching the toy spaceship. "Are we going to die?" he asked innocently. Her throat tightened. "No," she lied, kneeling to meet his gaze. "You're strong. You'll survive." Minutes later, the countdown began. From her position aboard Hope's Light, Alina stared at the doomed planet through the viewport, her hands trembling. When the antimatter bomb detonated, the explosion consumed both the shipyard and the colony in a blinding flash of light. Silence fell over the crew as the shockwave rippled outward, scattering debris across the stars. Alina sank into her chair, tears streaming down her face. They had stopped Oblivion, but at what cost? Sacrifice wasn't noble when it left scars this deep, and yet humanity lived to fight another day. But for how long could they keep paying such a high price? The aftermath of the antimatter detonation left an eerie silence in its wake. The once bustling colony was now a lifeless void, its existence erased in seconds. On board Hope's Light, Alina Voss sat alone in the dimly lit war room, staring at the empty space where the planet had been moments before. Her hands trembled as she replayed the events in her mind. The screams of the colonists, the desperation in their eyes, and the finality of her decision to sacrifice them for the greater good. Admiral Cal Draven entered without knocking, his boots echoing softly against the metal floor. He stopped a few feet away, watching her with an unreadable expression. "It's done," he said simply, his voice devoid of emotion. "Oblivion is gone." Alina didn't respond immediately. She turned her gaze toward him, her eyes red from crying but blazing with anger. "At what cost?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "We killed thousands of our own people today. How can you stand there and act like it doesn't matter?" Draven leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "Because it does matter. It matters that we stopped Oblivion. If we hadn't acted, billions would have died instead. You think I enjoy this? I've spent decades living with the consequences of hard choices. This is war, Captain. It's ugly, brutal, and unforgiving. But if you want to win, you have to be willing to make sacrifices." His words cut deep, but they offered no comfort. Alina knew he was right, logically, tactically, but logic couldn't silence the ghosts haunting her conscience. She clenched her fists tightly, nails digging into her palms. "Sacrifices," she repeated bitterly. "Is that what we call murder now? Are we really any better than the Empire?" Before Draven could answer, alarms blared throughout the ship. Lieutenant Eric Kane's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, Admiral, we've got trouble. Imperial reinforcements are inbound, larger than expected. They must have anticipated our retreat route." Alina sprang to her feet, wiping tears from her face. There was no time to grieve. Survival came first. "How long until they reach us?" she asked sharply. "Less than 10 minutes, Kane replied. "Their fleet outnumbers us 3-1. Draven stepped forward, his demeanor shifting instantly. Gone was the cold pragmatist. In his place stood a battle-hardened commander ready to fight until his last breath. "Then we give them hell," he growled. "Prepare the crew for combat. We're not letting them chase us down without a fight." As orders flew across the ship, the Coalition scrambled to prepare for what would likely be their most desperate battle yet. Draven took command of the offensive strategy, directing fighter squadrons to harass the incoming Imperial forces, while Alina coordinated defensive maneuvers to protect the flagship. Major Lyra Quinn worked feverishly to jam enemy communications, sowing confusion among their ranks. When the Imperials arrived, the battle erupted with devastating intensity. Explosions lit up the darkness as laser fire streaked through space. Draven led a daring assault on the enemy flagship, piloting his heavily armed cruiser straight into the heart of the Imperial fleet. His voice crackled over the comms, calm and resolute. "Hold the line. Don't let them flank us." Despite their smaller numbers, the coalition fought with ferocity born of desperation. Fighter pilots executed reckless maneuvers, sacrificing themselves to take out key targets. Engineers patched hull breaches mid-combat, refusing to abandon their posts even as oxygen levels dropped. Alina watched it all unfold from the bridge, her heart pounding as she issued commands to keep the ship intact. But the tide began to turn when the Empire activated Oblivion prematurely, targeting a nearby human settlement. Panic surged through the coalition. Had their mission failed after all? Draven made the ultimate choice. Ignoring Alina's frantic protests, he rammed his cruiser directly into the superweapon's core, disabling it just moments before it could fire. His final transmission echoed through the comms. "We were always doomed, but maybe you're not." As the Imperial fleet retreated, shattered and leaderless, Alina stared at the empty space where Draven's ship had been. Tears streamed down her face, but this time, they weren't just for loss. They were for hope. Against all odds, humanity had survived another day. The victory came at a cost too heavy to bear. Admiral Cal Draven was gone, his final act of defiance ensuring that Oblivion would never fire again. But as the coalition limped back to Earth with battered ships and broken spirits, Alina Voss knew the hardest battles were yet to come. The physical scars of war were visible in every damaged hull and weary face, but it was the emotional wounds, guilt, grief, and doubt that threatened to tear humanity apart. News of the battle spread quickly across human territories. For some, Draven's sacrifice became a symbol of redemption, proof that even monsters could choose to protect rather than destroy. Others saw only the brutal tactics he had employed along the way, questioning whether humanity had truly won anything by aligning itself with such ruthless individuals. Public opinion fractured further, with protests erupting outside United Human Council headquarters demanding accountability for the decisions made during the conflict. Alina stood before the council once more, this time not as a petitioner, but as a figure under intense scrutiny. Senators grilled her about the loss of innocent lives, the colony sacrificed, the civilians caught in crossfire during earlier missions, and the countless soldiers who had died following orders she approved. Senator Harlan Graves, ever cautious, voiced what many were thinking. "Captain Voss, you've achieved military success, yes, but at what moral cost? Are we becoming the very thing we sought to resist?" Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the podium. "I won't deny the choices we made were difficult, or that they came with consequences," she admitted, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "But ask yourself this. What happens when morality becomes a luxury we can no longer afford? Would you prefer I let billions die because sparing them meant crossing lines we swore never to cross?" The chamber erupted into heated debate. Some argued that justice demanded prosecution for war crimes committed by Draven's team, while others insisted context mattered, that desperate times called for desperate measures. Alina listened silently, knowing the argument wasn't just about her leadership but about humanity's identity. Was it still possible to fight for survival without losing their soul? Amidst the chaos, intelligence reports revealed troubling news. Though weakened, the Galactic Empire was regrouping. Surviving factions loyal to the Central Authority began consolidating power, vowing revenge against those who dared defy them. Humanity's window of opportunity was closing fast, and internal divisions risked leaving them vulnerable to retaliation. Determined to unite the fractured resistance, Alina drafted a bold proposal, a new human-led alliance independent of the crumbling empire. Unlike the old system, which prioritized central control, her vision emphasized transparency, shared governance, and mutual protection. She called it a free systems initiative. It wasn't perfect, but it offered a path forward, a chance to rebuild trust among human colonies and prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. When she presented the plan to the council, reactions were mixed. Some embraced it as a beacon of hope. Others dismissed it as naive idealism in a galaxy ruled by strength. Yet, one senator, an older woman named Mara Lynn, spoke up in support. "Perhaps Captain Voss is right," she said softly. "We cannot undo the past, but we can shape the future. If we are to survive, we must do so together." As the vote concluded, the resolution passed narrowly, signaling a fragile step toward unity. Outside the chamber, crowds gathered, holding candles in memory of those lost. Among them was Marcus Hale, who approached Alina quietly. "Do you think we'll ever be forgiven?" he asked. Alina looked out at the sea of faces illuminated by flickering light. "Forgiveness isn't ours to seek," she replied. "What matters is that we keep fighting. For survival, for justice, and for the belief that humanity deserves better." The road ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope. And sometimes, hope was enough to carry them through the darkness. Years passed, and the scars of war slowly began to heal. Humanity stood on the brink of a new era, shaped by sacrifices made in the darkest hours. The Galactic Empire, once an unshakable force, was now fractured and fading, a shadow of its former self. In its place rose the Free Systems Initiative, Alina Voss's vision of unity and shared governance. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it represented something humanity had almost forgotten: hope. Alina walked through the bustling corridors of the initiative's headquarters, located aboard a massive orbital station named New Horizon. The air buzzed with activity as diplomats, engineers, and scientists worked tirelessly to rebuild what had been lost. She paused at a viewport, gazing out at Earth below. Its blue-green surface shimmered under sunlight, a stark contrast to the barren moons and desolate planets she'd grown accustomed to seeing during the war. Her thoughts drifted back to those who hadn't lived to see this day. Admiral Cal Draven's final words echoed in her mind. "We were always doomed, but maybe you're not." His sacrifice, and the sacrifices of countless others, had given humanity a second chance, yet their absence weighed heavily on her. Every victory, every step forward carried the weight of lives lost along the way. "Captain," a voice called softly behind her. She turned to see Marcus Hale approaching, his expression unusually serious. "The council is waiting for your address." She nodded, taking one last look at Earth before heading toward the assembly hall. Inside, representatives from across human territories filled the chamber, their faces reflecting a mix of optimism and caution. These were survivors, people who had endured betrayal, loss, and despair, but refused to give up. As Alina stepped onto the stage, silence fell over the room. "Today marks a new chapter for humanity," she began, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. "We have faced unimaginable challenges, made choices no one should ever have to make, and bled more than any species should bear. But here we stand, not broken, but stronger because of what we've overcome." She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the crowd. "We are not defined by our mistakes or our losses. We are defined by how we rise after falling. And today, I believe we've risen higher than anyone thought possible." Applause erupted, filling the chamber with sound. But Alina didn't miss the lingering doubts etched into some faces. Trust took time to rebuild, especially when so many wounds remained fresh. She knew full well that disagreements and struggles lay ahead. Building alliances required patience, compromise, and forgiveness, qualities humanity was still learning to embrace. After the ceremony, Alina returned to her quarters, exhausted but resolute. Sitting at her desk, she opened a private log file. For years, she had documented everything: the battles fought, the lives lost, the impossible decisions made. Tonight, she added one final entry. "To those who gave everything, you taught us that survival isn't just about strength. It's about resilience, about finding light even in the deepest darkness. If future generations remember anything, let it be this: we didn't fight only to live. We fought to prove we're worth saving." As she closed the file, tears welled in her eyes. Outside her window, ships departed New Horizon, carrying settlers, supplies, and dreams toward uncharted stars. Humanity was stepping boldly into the unknown, determined to forge its own destiny. Alina whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. "For all of you, we'll keep moving forward." And somewhere beyond the stars, amidst the echoes of war and sacrifice, there was peace, not complete, not permanent, but enough to remind them why they had fought so hard to survive.